The image is striking in its vulnerability. Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, his face contorted, eyes brimming with tears he can no longer contain. Captured during a public engagement or perhaps in the quiet confessional of an interview, such moments transcend tabloid headlines. They become cultural touchstones, prompting a global intake of breath and a flurry of analysis. But to dismiss this as merely a heartbreaking moment is to miss the profound narrative it represents. This visible breakdown is not an isolated incident of private grief made public. It is the manifest crest of a lifelong wave of pressure, loss, and systemic emotional restraint. It is a window into the immense, often invisible, human cost of a life lived under the crown's gilded weight. To understand the depth of that tear, one must first map the terrain of his early life, a childhood that was both unimaginably privileged and uniquely traumatic. Harry was born into a global spotlight, his every milestone documented from the hospital steps onward. While this provided material comfort beyond measure, it simultaneously erected walls between him and a normal childhood. The death of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales, in 1997, when he was just 12, was the catastrophic fault line that shattered his world. The public spectacle of that loss, the echoing silence of a flag at half-mast over Buckingham Palace, the surreal, mournful procession behind her coffin that he was compelled to join, watched by millions, meant his grief was never his own. It was communal property, analyzed and lamented by strangers.
In the stiff upper lip environment of the royal family and the British establishment, there was little room for the messy, vocal processing of a child's anguish. The reported instruction to walk and show your strength for the cameras became a metaphor for the emotional code he was expected to internalize. Perform your duty, suppress your pain. For years, Harry admitted he simply shut down all emotion, believing that if he didn't think about his mother, it wouldn't hurt. This enforced stoicism, a defense mechanism against an unbearable reality, created a deep well of unprocessed trauma that would shape his entire adulthood. His teenage and young adult years of revelry and occasional scandal can be reinterpreted not as mere rebellion, but as the flailings of a young man trying to navigate immense pain without the tools to do so, all while the world labeled him the spare to the heir. His decade of military service with the British Army provided a crucial, if complex, reprieve. In the military, he found a structure and camaraderie defined not by birthright, but by shared purpose. He was Captain Wales, valued for his skills as a forward air controller and Apache helicopter pilot. This period offered a powerful alternative identity. However, it also exposed him directly to the horrors of war during 2 tours in Afghanistan. Here, he witnessed a different kind of trauma, one that resonated with his own hidden wounds. The psychological impact of combat, the loss of colleagues, and the moral injury of warfare added new layers to his burden. Yet the military's own culture often mirrored the royal one in its discouragement of emotional weakness, creating another environment where bearing pain was the norm.
The return to full-time royal duties after leaving the army marked a difficult transition. The institutional firm, as the monarchy is known, operates on timeless ritual, silent endurance, and media management. Emotional displays are seen as a liability, a crack in the impeccable facade. Harry, however, was changing. His relationship with Meghan Markle, begun in 2016, became a catalyst for profound personal transformation. In her, he found not only love, but a partner who encouraged openness and emotional honesty, values starkly at odds with the palace's traditional playbook. Their courtship and marriage also exposed the ugly underbelly of the institution, the rampant, often racially charged media harassment, and what they perceived as a lack of support from within the family. This clash of values reached its zenith in the decision to step back as senior royals in 2020, the so-called Megxit. The act was revolutionary, a severing of centuries-old protocol in pursuit of psychological survival. The emotional toll of this rupture cannot be overstated. It meant leaving behind his role, his homeland, his military patronages, and fracturing relationships with his father, King Charles III, and his brother, Prince William. He was choosing his mental health and his immediate family safety over a duty he was born into, a choice that likely carried immense guilt, anxiety,
It is against this exhaustive backdrop that his public tears must be viewed, whether they fell during an interview recalling his mother's death, while speaking about the relentless persecution of his wife, or in discussing the feeling of being trapped. Each instance is a release valve for a specific, pressurized history. The tears for a mother. When Harry speaks of Diana, his emotion is the raw, enduring grief of a child, finally allowed to surface after decades. It is a protest against the unnaturalness of mourning in public while being forbidden to do so in private. These tears challenge the narrative of quiet acceptance and honor the vibrant, loving relationship that was so brutally severed. The tears for a partner and a family under siege. His emotion when discussing the media's treatment of Meghan and the fears for her safety and mental health reveal a man tormented by a history repeating itself. He saw in the press hounding of his wife terrifying echoes of his mother's persecution. These tears are ones of fury, helplessness, and a desperate protective love, mingled with trauma from a past he could not prevent from intruding on his present. Perhaps the most complex are the tears for lost family unity. Speaking of his father and brother, Harry's pain speaks to a deep, primal wound, the fracture of the only other people who truly shared the bizarre, gilded cage of his upbringing. These are tears of betrayal, confusion, and profound loss, mourning not just relationships, but a shared identity and the dream of a united front against shared adversities. Prince Harry's decision to voice his pain, most notably in his memoir Spare and in televised interviews, is a deliberate and radical act. In an institution built on never complain, never explain, he has done both extensively. This is his most significant and controversial contribution to the modern royal discourse. By naming his trauma, parental loss, press intrusion, familial estrangement, he has weaponized vulnerability. He has challenged the very notion that strength is synonymous with silence. The impact of this is multifaceted. For the public, it has provided an unprecedented humanization of a figure who was often cartoonized. It has sparked global conversations about mental health, press ethics, and the psychological demands of hereditary systems. Within the context of the monarchy, it represents an existential challenge. Harry's tears and his testimony force an uncomfortable reckoning. Can a millennia-old institution, whose power rests partly on mystique and emotional inscrutability, evolve to prioritize the human well-being of its members? Or is that humanity inevitably the price paid for duty? The impact of this is multifaceted. For the public, it has provided an unprecedented humanization of a figure who was often cartoonized. It has sparked global conversations about mental health, press ethics, and the psychological demands of hereditary systems. Within the context of the monarchy, it represents an existential challenge. Harry's tears and his testimony force an uncomfortable reckoning. Can a millennia-old institution, whose power rests partly on mystique and emotional inscrutability, evolve to prioritize the human well-being of its members? Or is that humanity inevitably the price paid for duty? The heartbreaking moment of Prince Harry in tears is therefore far more than a fleeting display of sentiment. It is a culmination. It is the physical manifestation of a lifelong struggle between the dictates of an ancient institution and the needs of a modern man. Each tear contains a history of suppressed mourning, institutional pressure, fractured bonds, and a fierce, hard-won battle for personal authenticity. They represent the breaking of a cycle, a refusal to pass on the legacy of silent suffering to his own children. His journey, marked by these very public emotional thresholds, suggests a painful but necessary truth, that sometimes the most royal act of all is to reclaim one's own humanity, even if it means dismantling, piece by emotional piece, the armor one was born wearing. The tears are not a sign of weakness, but evidence of a profound and costly strength, the strength to feel and finally to heal.